fun stories, but the kids were like, we need to get the Versages involved. You know, as a mediator. They wanted to get, you know, somebody else in there. And yeah, it's pretty humbling. I'm the man, I'm the mom of the household who needs somebody else. But they do need to be heard.
And they're pretty quick to pick up on the fact that changes come in, we can either oppose it or we can be part of it. I mean, they get this figured out pretty fast. Yeah. Kids want boundaries. They want to know where the limits are.
Yes.
It makes them feel more comfortable. They know the rules.
Yeah, that's right.
That's okay. If the rules change, okay, deal with the emotions, but the rules change.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say so for me we battle with the world, right? There's no question. We're going to be constant. I think in some cases too, we battle amongst each other, you know, in the church, especially with parenting, but it's also, you know, as singles or in my experience, because we set the standard, right? God's standard, but yeah, from that there's multiple interpretations of the standards within, and so how do we develop, I don't want to say consensus because that may be, so for instance, like for some person, you know, I'm not going to go see our movies, right? To me, you know, other people, you know, that's, you know, it's okay. But you know, from everything to, you know, when you get a phone or when you not get a phone or you know, what apps you can use, because so for instance, I have a 15-year-old daughter, right, who's going to come back from teen camp being like, oh, but so-and-so can do this and so-and-so can do that. And
Up in New York, they do
they're
this.
and
Up
they're
in Boston,
disciples.
they do that. Yeah.
They're disciples, and
I think
is there a way to?
I don't have a good answer for that. The only one that if you go back to Joshua,
He's so smart.
He's Minnesota.
Joshua says, "You can do all these things, but for me and my household, we will follow the Lord."
That's right.
And I think that's what, and that helps your kids develop convictions as well.
Yeah.
See, mom and dad know what the Bible says, and that's what they're going to follow. All these other influences are there, but we don't necessarily have to be swayed by them. They're going to be there in their lifetimes as well. They've got to learn to have convictions. And so you setting that conviction, this is how it works in our house. You go over to Jamie's house, that may be how it works, but we're going to talk about that when you get home. What did you see at Jamie's house? What did you watch on television? What did you see on Jamie's phone? You know, I want to know what's going on at Jamie's house. And maybe there's some time for some conversation with Jamie's parents. Hey, you know, this is what your conduct is allowing into my family. You got to think about that because that's already in your family.
Well, we have a situation where one teen is on a much more restricted viewing of, you know, what she's allowed to view than another teen. And it has caused, and the other teen is working on being respectful of those boundaries, but she wanted to have a gathering of a little bit older girls, and she did include this younger teen because they were going to watch a movie, not really inappropriate, but not what the younger teen was allowed to watch. And the mother struggled with this of explaining, but she was respectful of the boundary. Now, yes, the younger one was hurt a little bit and had to work through this, but, you know, allow those emotions to be expressed. You know, you're a big person, you can handle it. You understand their disappointment. You understand that they want to do what their friends are doing. But not everything, some things are helpful, not everything's beneficial.
Right.
What is that scripture? Or, Paul talks about it. It's choosing what's best for your family.
And I think, we had this tendency sometimes to spare our children any adversity.
Right.
God, adversity is good for them, it helps build character.
Yeah, tomorrow.
And we gotta really, let them work through that.
Yeah,
If you're disappointed, I'm sorry you're disappointed. Let's talk about this. How do we get through this disappointment?
Sport's not the only place that have to work through disappointment.
That's right. Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
I just wanted to return to what you all said about like not in my house. What are some ways that you have respectfully, between each other, established that as being okay, and how have you communicate that in a respectful way? I'll give you an example, and I'm asking for just for our household in general, but I enjoy sweets, and sometimes I feel like, okay, like I have it somewhat under control, but I know that I am, I'm vulnerable to emotional eating, and it can get out of hand. How have you figured out ways to, do you get what I'm trying to figure out ways, how do you set the stage so that it's not like a butting heads when something does come up, and, like, let's say Rashawn says, it's like, okay, not in my house, we're not going to, give into this in this way, this is just an example.
Sure.
And I get tense and frustrated and everything like that, are there ways that you all have seen to set that?
Yeah, she has to share the first row of brownies with me.
The first row.
I totally,
So, sorry.
Neil, when we go shopping, we don't buy the things that tempt me, but I sometimes still will buy the chips and the things that he really likes. And then I sit there going, I like chips too.
Talk yourself into it.
Oh, a defensive eating. I'll eat everything that she likes so that she doesn't tempt me.
An ice cream cone
Very helpful,
and
man.
he's eating my ice cream. Oh, we had a real argument. Got my ice cream cone, and I'm like, you just took half. Well, I don't want you to have the calories.
Marriage support.
It's my calories. It's my. That
Lord
was.
mercy.
As for me in my house, I will eat the ice cream. We can have fun with some of this, but I understand what you're saying, and I think one of the things that we've done, we've worked hard on agreeing what we can and can't have in the house. And so we both struggle with that a little bit. You'll get to a point where this makes sense, and you can work a little bit at a time. I remember we had a challenge. I was trying to record the Lord of the Rings movie that I hadn't seen yet, and it was
A couple of decades
so
ago.
I knew I'd seen it, and I was scrolling through the channels, trying to get this set up before I went to bed. And so I'm in the dining room, or in the living room by myself, and I get into the 400s, and I start seeing these adult channel titles, and I'm going, wait a minute, where's this coming from? It finally dawned on me what the guys would say in our group. It's like, I stayed up too late watching TV. And I said, what can happen bad on Johnny Carson? And then I see the issue. And so I just said, okay, hold on, turn that off. And I went to bed. The next morning, I said to Cheryl, hey, you've got to help me with this. You got to go in there and block those titles. And so she did. Then we probably forgot the code, so it would never be unlocked again.
There you go. That's good for getting right there.
So, we learned to work together over an issue that was definitely my issue, and we've done the same with chips and brownies, and
Well, a serving size, what is it, and then it's like, what are you feeling when you're going after that? Why do you like that? Well, I just like sweet tasting. It tastes good, but am I bored? Am I stressed about something? What is it? And how is this beneficial? How is this helping me. For me, I keep a diary of what I'm eating, and I have to show my coach what my weight is from the day before and what I ate the day before and how many steps. So I have to write down these things, and it's like, how many excuses am I going to write down for that brownie? Which does not, it's how many, what I deliberately did that, and it's carb loading, and it's sabotaging what I'm trying to do. I have to really think about it.
But that not
An
only applies-
accountability partner is what I'm saying you have to need.
Is there a way that you all have found to, and thank you, but is there a way that you all have found to respectfully help each other out? I think that you.
Yeah.
Besides him eating my
Besides eating the brownies?
In the moment, or like if you realize, oh, okay, this is going a little too far, there may be something
Yeah, I
more
think
going on.
a good example of that is my propensity to enjoy a glass of bourbon in the evening, or in the wintertime, a glass of scotch. But Cheryl will watch me, and she'll ask me a question. Do you need another glass? Yeah, what's going on? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Sure, yeah.
Allowing me to stop and think,
Right,
putting me in the logical decision tree,
Sure.
not the emotional
right,
decision
that's
tree.
good.
Oh, that was a yummy. I'll go have another yummy.
Right,
And it's the same response with the brownie. That was a good brownie. I'll just have another one. Why are you in that mode? I think for me, and we have to develop disciplines associated with that. What I do is I have here's my quiet time book. If anybody wants to see if I'm having my quiet times, here's my quiet time book. But I do that because, and if I don't have a quiet time, I draw a line in the blank space and I put a circle around it with a big question in it. And the question is, why didn't you have a quiet time? Did you wake up in time? Did it allow something to distract you in the morning that all of a sudden it's noon and you, and so it forces me to think about my relationship with God in perspective of the rest of my life and what's going on that day. So that's a way that I've found to discipline myself in habits that I sometimes find difficult to be consistent in. And yes, I have missed a quiet time from time to time. Check my book.
I definitely, I pray to help God set my boundaries, and it's taking that captive every thought and talking to God about what is it, why am I doing this, and what's the harm? How is it not beneficial? I tease Neil, we were driving to Minnesota, and we kept passing Dairy Queen. There's another Dairy Queen, there's Dairy Queen. Boy, did I annoy my husband. He finally said, "We'll stop for the Dairy Queen." But I realized, nagging wife wears down husband. It was like, but on the other hand, when I've been really good for a while and stuff like that, and it's time for a treat, then he's like, yeah, we'll enjoy this together. So, but you can nag your way into getting what you want to.
But I think practicing that conversation, whatever it is or whatever the subject, you gotta practice. Because the first time it's probably not gonna work out real well.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's true. Just not.
And Neil says, I hate to say no to you. I hate, he hates to say no to me. So I'm not being a helper to myself or him by putting him in a compromising situation. So.
Maybe one or two more questions, so we can close out at 12:10.
Mine was along the lines of that. So I'm trying to figure out how, or if you guys have advice for how to communicate, like, not in my house, but also having grace, and not further shaming when, like, a husband does share something, and stopping them from wanting to confess ever again.
Yep.
Like, how can you navigate that?
Well, that's gonna take a little time,
Okay.
because the goal is not in my house, not in my marriage.
Right.
And that should be understood. I think a lot of it has to do with the tone, the words that you use. Again, looking at the compassion of Jesus, not becoming a tolerance.
Right.
And that's a tricky one. Again, I think it takes time, it takes practice. How does that make you feel? What were you thinking? Ask questions rather than, not my house, not my marriage, that's what it's going to be around here, and everybody better shape up. Yeah, it'd be hard to swallow. But that ability to get that conversation started and uncover the emotion and the driving events, that's the key. I think a lot of times we respond to things without thinking about them. That becomes the problem. If we can back up that process to the point where we can talk about it, we can pray about it together, we can discover it, we can, okay, so letting you sleep until 8 o'clock in the morning is not a good idea. How about I wake you up at 7? Okay, well, in our house, sorry guys, I deliver the coffee before she wakes up.
Oh, snap. Come on.
Okay, this session's done.
I took 20 seconds time out.
He is retired. Sorry.
We're at my house.
I'm a morning person. I wake up at 6 o'clock whether there's an alarm on or not.
That's right.
Cheryl's not a morning person, but she has changed so much over the years that sometimes she'll wander out at 6:20. Oh man, what are you doing? I'm like, coffee's not ready yet. But we've, it's taken us 41 years to get there. So that I got to have this conversation, solve the problem approach may not be helpful. It's have the first conversation, knowing we're going to have maybe conversations for another 20 years. But the goal is not my house, not my marriage.
Cool.
And having mercy, knowing your husband's background, what were triggers, what was there, and husbands having a genuine sorrow, a genuine repentance, and that is so helpful. But it's okay to say, wow, that's overwhelming. I don't know what to do about this right now. Let me think on this, let me pray. The snap, wow, you just blew it and that's it, and I can't stand the sight of you, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
But expressing disappointment, sorrow,
And I think
lack of trust.
noting change over time is important.
Right.
And
Praise, praise.
it isn't necessarily the observation that you've noted, is that you
Right.
ask your spouse,
Sure.
are you feeling any change? Are you sensing any change? Is this situation getting better or not? Do we need more help? Allowing that discussion to take place without an accusatory element in it. I think that's a key element.
And the Every Heart Restored, she's, I'm not all the way through the book yet, but she talks about applying the dressing, the wounds from the past for what he's done, but then the iron sharpens iron. And you have to pray for discernment, and get input. And like, Julia had a question.
Yeah, well, two things. I want to say thanks. You brought up something that I remember being taught as a young parent, and it was really refreshing and good to hear again, which was when you gave the example about your kids saying, I think we need to call, this other family. And I feel like that's a piece of advice I got as a young mom, and it has been so beneficial just through the years to create discussion with our girls, to let them know that we love each other enough that we're going to go outside of us,
Sure.
and they can too, and that it's safe, and you can actually, Jenny probably knows more than anybody, with our older daughter, I'd be like, go ahead and call Jenny and tell her what we just said to each other, like what you said and what I said, so that there's safe
Sure.
space. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's so valuable in dealing with everything in life, including these vices that kind of trip us up. But My question, I actually had one of our team workers ask me to ask you, and I think that it is a good question even among parents. She asked, how do we help our teens, especially as an outsider, with things that they see in terms of use of the phone or use, pretty much the phone was the question that she wanted me to present to you. But I think it also, we've been working a lot with our parents on like village parenting mindset. And so I think that even kind of comes into that community kind of feel in, you know, it's the parents' ownership on setting the boundaries and talking to them. How do we embrace things from the outside, and how do people, whether we're the outsider or whether it's our team workers that are the outsiders, how do we address that? And then maybe even with teens who don't have family in the church but they're part of our ministry. That's kind of a
One
lot,
question. I think it has to start with a conversation of everybody getting on the same page. You can't have the parents with one perspective, the team leader with another perspective, and the kids with a third. You gotta have, and I think we oftentimes find ourselves where, well, that's a team leader thing, that's a parent thing, and they're not connected. And I think getting everybody to sit down and, you know, having the team work over for dinner and let's talk about this thing, it's come up, and, you know,
Humility.
we're family.
Humility.
We're a biological family, but we're also a spiritual family. And I think the spiritual family unity sometimes is more important than the biological family function, because it's easier for an outsider oftentimes to see things. Well, you say this, but I see this. That's incongruent. So we've got to kind of get this figured out. So this is your perspective. This is your perspective. This is your perspective. What do you think is best overall? And you can have a dictatorial answer, hey, this is the way it's going to be. Ryan will provide that. Or you kind of have a collusion of thoughts. And what is the best solution? What is the best spiritual application here? How do we best come up with something that we can all work with and doesn't undermine God's principle and focus for our lives? And I think you'd be surprised sometimes what the teen answer really is. They know it. They're just going to see how far they can push the boundary. Bring it back to what's the real application. They're more idealistic. They could be like much more constructive and conservative in that application than we imagine sometimes. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Rondo.